Hey guys, what's up? So the big official server update is finally here! And let's do a quick recap on all the changes. Number 1 on the list is Lolita's revamp. She can now give shield even if the team is on combat. The HP-based damage on her first skill is removed, and her second skill shield can now reflect incoming projectiles. Her ultimate will now continue if it's interrupted by basic crowd control effects. Use her before more players catch on. Next is the buff on Mathilda, and she can now select an area to dash during her ultimate. This makes her ultimate very versatile because she can also bring an ally with her. And her teammates will have a longer time to decide if they want to go with her second skill dash. Next is the nerf on Floryn. Her ultimate now has a longer cooldown, weaker heal, and they remove the damage. Her first skill also has a weaker heal because the missing HP scaling has been removed, and her passive will no longer be upgraded because the stats will now scale with level. The item that she gives to her teammate has a new effect, and it now grants extra magic damage every few seconds. Based on the developers, they had to nerf her healing abilities in exchange for more damage from the extra item. Next is the buff on Rafaela. Her second skill will now remove slow effect and will also grant slow immunity for 1.5 seconds. They also improve her heal by making it scale better with magic power. And the movement buff on her second skill will also increase with magic items. A good patch for Rafaela mains. Next is the adjustment on Estes. His healing skills now have lower base points and higher magic scaling. That means tank build Estes will have lower heals. Based on the patch, they're encouraging supports to use magic items instead of sticking with a full defense build. Next is Diggie, and just like Estes, his shield will have lower base stats and higher magic scaling. Maybe you'd want to add 1 or 2 magic items to his build. Next is Angela, and she's also included in the support adjustment. Lower base stats on her heal, but the magic scaling is significantly increased. Next is the buff on Zhong with a higher passive damage and stronger skill 1. Next is the buff on Phoveus, and he gets shorter cooldown on all of his skills. Damage and mana cost on his first skill are also improved. Next is the buff on Julian. His passive skill cooldown is now shorter by 1 to 1.5 seconds. Next is the buff on Benedetta with a higher damage and shorter cooldown on her first skill. Next is the buff on Aamon with a longer ultimate range. Next is the adjustment on Johnson, where you now need to press a button before you can ride his ultimate. Next is Akai with higher stats on his passive and stronger slow effect on his second skill. Next is Barats, and they lowered the mana cost on both his first and second skill. Next is the buff on Baxia with a longer stun duration and shortened cooldown on his first skill. Next is Minotaur, and his heal will now scale with magic power. This is made so that he can use the new item, Flask of the Oasis. Next is the buff on Lylia, where she gains 50% recharge time when her max upgraded Gloom hits an enemy hero. This buff enables you to cast more Glooms in team fights. Next is the buff on Luo Yi with higher damage on her first skill and more movement speed on her passive. Next is the buff on Cyclops, and he gets shorter cooldown and lower mana cost on his first skill. And they also improve the movement boost on his second skill. Next is the buff on Ixia. Her ultimate now has a longer range. And her passive and basic attacks can now activate during her ultimate state. To balance, they had to remove the attack speed boost, increase its cooldown, and shorten the duration. Next is the buff on Popol and Koopa because the developers want him to become a jungler. Koopa now has higher damage against jungle creeps, and they also shortened the cooldown on his first and second skill. Next is the buff on Melissa with a higher attack speed buff on her first skill. Next is the buff on Wanwan. She gained higher basic attack damage in exchange for a longer cooldown on her second skill. Next is the adjustment on Beatrix. Her submachine gun gets a damage nerf on late game, while the shotgun is stronger in the early stages. Next is Miya's second skill. The range is now longer, but they've added a slight delay. Next is the nerf on Bruno. He was too strong with the critical equipment, so they had to lower the base damage of his first skill. Next is the nerf on Claude. His ultimate will have a higher base damage, but they're removing the extra damage to minions. And they're also reducing the attack effects on his ultimate. Next is the nerf on Fanny with a lower base damage on her first skill. Next is the nerf on Paquito's mobility with a longer cooldown on his second skill. Next is the nerf on Kadita. First skill and ultimate will have lower base damage. Next is the nerf on Valentina, where they lower the damage on her first skill. Next is the nerf on Eve's farming capability, where they remove the extra damage of her first skill against minions. Next is the release of the new hero Nolan, and he'll be available on September 30.
Gaze upon the edge of the void.
Next are the item adjustments, and number 1 is the Flask of the Oasis. It's a new support item that grants shield to low HP allies. It can also increase your healing effect by 12%. Fleeting time will now give 300 HP instead of mana. Demon Shoes will have a higher mana regen, and it now restores 4% mana when you get minion kills or assists. Warrior Boots will now work on all kinds of physical damage, regardless if it's basic attack or skill. Ice Queen Wand will need more time to apply the full stacks. It now has 3 stacks, each with 10% slow, and it has a 1-second cooldown before you can apply the next stack. Next is the new talent Wilderness Blessing, which gives 15% movement speed when you're in the jungle and river area. And it replaced the old Life Drain talent. Last is the Project Next heroes with their new designs. We have Lylia, Johnson, Bruno, X-Borg, and Miya. And that covers our official server update for September. So, if we compare it to Advanced Server, Moscow's revamp and the new Linux are not included. Maybe we'll see them next month. So what can you say about this update? Which heroes will come out on top? Share your predictions in the comment section. That's all for this video. Stay safe and thank you for watching.